Namaste and welcome to the Bharatvaarta Weekly. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Roshan Karyappa. I have with me Neerav Kanodra and Abhishek Paul to run you through the news and events of the week that was. If this is your first time on the podcast, do check us out. I mean, we're a politics, policy, culture-based podcast focused on India. We cover a series of diverse topics through the week. And if you are a returning visitor, if you're a returning listener, do consider rating us, reviewing us, and following us and subscribing us on all your favorite platforms. It really helps us do better. Today we're going to talk about a bunch of things. Imran Khan, the Pakistan Prime Minister, was wounded in a gun attack. There were ED raids across multiple locations in West Bengal and Jharkhand. Of course, I mean, the T20 World Cup is kind of heating up. Teams have qualified for the semifinals. We'll talk about who are the favorites and what are the odds like. Closer home, Shiv Sena leader was shot dead during a protest in Amritsar. And we'll also talk about a string of tech layoffs that have happened, following the funding winter. And there were some very interesting discussions from the India Today Conclave as well. All of this on and more on the Bharatvaarta Weekly this week. Hey Abhishek, hey Neerav, thank you so much for joining. How's it going?
Hey, Carrie. Going good.
All
How
good,
are you?
Carrie, yeah.
Awesome. So let's talk about a couple of episodes we put out last week. So we finally published the episode with Arpit Gupta, and it was a very wide-ranging conversation on EVs, PLIs, and whatnot. I think to me it was really refreshing to hear a voice from the outside, and there were a lot of unintuitive, sort of unusual insights as well. Like, for example, the impact of the pandemic, has been sort of uneven. We all expected that, but we kind of expected that it would be harsher on the bottom 25-30 percentile. But it seems like, it's been the other way around, right? I mean, it has been harsher on the top 25 percentile. And, Arpit has sort of done a very data-driven study on this. It's very nice when he looks at these trends from his vantage point, right? Which is, he is based in the West. He's an economics professor. And he's looking at it, fairly academically, without any sort of a bias or without an activist mindset as such. So yeah, I mean, it's a wonderful podcast. Do check it out. We also had the historian Vikram Sampatji on the podcast again. This was about a new book that he's got out called Bharat's Unsung Heroes. And he was in discussion with Sharan Sethi. Again, fantastic podcast, talks about all of the various heroes that perhaps, I mean, not a lot of us know. Do check it out as well. Let's begin with the first piece of news. Pakistan former Prime Minister Imran Khan was wounded in a gun attack on Thursday. He was shot in the leg 3-4 times at a political rally in Gujranwala and was admitted to a hospital in Lahore. The doctors at the hospital confirmed he was in stable condition as the wounds were not fatal. Imran Khan and his supporters have called this, to quote, a heinous assassination attempt and blamed Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif, the Interior Minister, and top ISI officials for the apparent attempt on his life. Prime Minister Shahbaz has condemned the attack and demanded a full court commission to probe assassination allegations. Neerav, this is a very eerie scene, right? I mean, it kind of reminds you of what has happened in Pakistan in the past, right? Whether it was with Benazir Bhutto or the others, right?
Yeah. So basically what has happened recently is, if you just look at it from the outside, Imran Khan had won an election, but he kind of did a few things which unsettled or like made the army uncomfortable. They kind of like through the back door ousted him and got in Shehbaz Sharif, who's related to the previous PM Nawaz Sharif and his party, right? And now they are in power, but there were a couple of local elections in Pakistan where Imran Khan's party PTI, Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, won a few more seats. So there's a lot of protest rallies. Imran Khan wanted to call for another general election, whereas the party in Punjab, I think it's called PPP, wanted to like bar Imran Khan from holding any public office ever, right? And including the army. So there's a lot of like kind of, you can say, tensions. Second thing is Pakistan is going through a lot of chaos. You had like big floods. They claim maybe 30% are submerged. Maybe I find it difficult to believe, but yes, there's a lot of damage due to floods. You've had they are very dependent on foreign funding for their debt, and you have IMF and China being their main lenders. There have been like tough terms and conditions where Pakistan finally eventually repays that debt, but then they cut on local government spending. So I think it's going through like a lot of turmoil, right? Uh, Sri Lanka was going through as well. So Pakistan is going through as well. And now law and order in Pakistan, like I don't know whether it's an assassination attempt which was directed by any other part of the government or the military or whoever. But in these kind of times, law and order does break down. And Pakistan has had a long history of PMs or people in opposition, leading leaders of political parties being assassinated. While it seems, or whatever the person who's commented says he's like a lone wolf, we don't know. And so it just tells that the situation isn't too good. Imran Khan's popularity was actually rising. So maybe it is actually like a hit job instead of if when things are bad and people are upset, the assassination goes towards the leaders, right? Not somebody who's in the opposition, because he didn't bring about this problem. So, anyways, as in, it's a very sad thing for anyone. Glad that Imran Khan has just been wounded and he'll recover. So he's also 70 years old, but the wounds are just on his leg. So hopefully he recovers. Hopefully there is some sort of peace in Pakistan. And as you know, like a lot of times, if like the hit was kind of like directed by well-connected higher-ups, a lot of the investigation is a shoddy job, which no conclusive evidence ever comes out, right? So I'm not too hopeful about it, but I have no idea who all are involved. The person who was caught on video, and he commented that Imran Khan is trying to mislead people and saying wrong things to people, and he was like a lone wolf. But let us see. Let's see what happens. But what I feel is you've seen things go wrong in Sri Lanka. You've seen things go wrong in Pakistan. We are in a period of a little bit more instability across like what you would call like the weaker emerging markets or the frontier markets or economies which are like very fragile. And I think we'll see more chaos and more stress points. And now we don't know when something is under stress, we don't know what breaks, right? So here in Pakistan, here law and order breaking down or attempt at a political assassination is one, but you will see more negative news than positive, at least in the next few months.
Yeah, it's been a heck of a time in the Asian region itself, right? I mean, I think it's about a year since Prime Minister Shinzo Abe was assassinated, right? And yeah, we've seen the chaos that has ensued in Sri Lanka as well. Yeah, so hopefully, things get better. All right, moving on. The Enforcement Directorate has raided multiple locations in West Bengal and Jharkhand. On Friday, the enforcement conducted searches in nearly half a dozen locations in West Bengal and Jharkhand as part of a money laundering probe into alleged illegal occupation and sale of defense land in Jharkhand. Abhishek, what can you tell us about this?
Yeah, so this is like an ongoing case where there are like two angles involved. So the accused is a businessman, Amit Agarwal, who has like his businesses in West Bengal and Jharkhand, right? And the major allegation is that there has been some sort of serious money laundering using forged documents, etc., of defense lands, right? So it's like a land grab of army lands. That is the main case here. But there is also an interesting angle where so this person is supposed to be close to the to Hemant Soren, right, the Jharkhand chief minister, and um, there is a lawyer who has been raising PILs against Hemant Soren, and so there was some sort of allegation against this Amit Agarwal for having done some conspiracy to trap that lawyer Rajiv Kumar. So there are basically these two things involved. I think there have been number of raids on his various locations of his business in Calcutta and other places in West Bengal, right? And so, yeah, I mean, interesting to see. Army land grab is basically like a very daring thing to do, right? So, I don't know. Like I mean, it definitely takes a lot of audacity for people to pull off land grabbing the Indian Army's land. So, yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see if there is a lot more connection of politicians in Jharkhand or even West Bengal, and then what are the political repercussions that come out of it.
Right. In more political news, Shiv Sena leader Sudhir Suri was shot dead outside a temple when the leaders of the Uddhav Thackeray faction were protesting against the temple's authorities after the discovery of some broken idols in the garbage outside the temple premises. Sudhir's close aide Ashok Sharma alleged that the Khalistani groups were behind the attack and raised concerns about the deteriorating law and order, considering prior requests to increase security. Nirav, this is again pretty unfortunate, and you kind of seems to be like continuing chaos in Punjab as well, right?
Yeah. So one thing like Shiv Sena, this expansion in Punjab, and like I think in the 90s, Shiv Sena was like a rising force. They set up like a lot of offices. They keep contesting elections but losing their deposits as well. So Shiv Sena is a non-entity in Punjab, right? And the original Shiv Sena, which was there, in the Ram Mandir movement and mobilizing kind of like Hindu forces, they had a lot of people join them, and then there are a lot of factions. So apparently in Punjab there are 15 factions of Shiv Sena, right? So that is one thing. Second thing, the event is that there is a particular mandir, a Krishna temple, Gopal Mandir, in Amritsar, and outside which this Shiv Sena leader Suri was, he had a shop outside it, right? And he found some posters and idols in a garbage dump. Now we don't know who was involved, etc. He kind of created a ruckus and had a dharna outside. So there are two versions. One is that there are two opposing factions who want to control of the temple, etc. And they kind of had a dispute. There's another theory that maybe the Khalistanis have kind of done this. There's another one that there is a between Sikh and the Hindus, whatever. But what this tells you, it doesn't matter what the issue is. It doesn't matter who put those idols in the garbage. That should be restored. That shouldn't have happened in the first place. But it's really sad that somebody had to lose their life on this kind of a trivial issue, because like, you know, you cannot unburn toast. So this cannot be turned back. And this tells you the fall down of like law and order in Punjab. Again, you've had a lot of chaos. You've had like the big high profile political assassination of Sidhu Singh Moosewala. This is why like Shiv Sena is a non-entity. It's not electorally relevant, but this was another assassination which happened in the state. This is not really, whichever way you can say, leadership of the state has to take some amount of blame. Unlike like Pakistan, which is like, you can say it's like a failed state or law and order doesn't really work, etc. Right? In India, it's not. So this shouldn't be acceptable. We should hold our elected leaders and police forces to a higher standard, right? So hopefully there's a proper investigation done. The people involved do get booked, and hopefully you see some action being taken. This is in the, I don't have much else to say, but this is like an extremely sad thing, right? Doesn't matter which side of the political spectrum, doesn't matter what was there. Both things shouldn't have happened. Like we should not, it's not just about a temple. Any holy place should not be desecrated. There shouldn't be any sort of like vandalism at all. And second thing is that if there was somebody conducting a dharna, that should have been done, and those issues should have been addressed in a peaceful manner. There's no need for anyone to die. So it's just another sad thing. And hopefully here, I'm more hopeful in India that at least there's some actual investigation and somebody's brought to book on this.
All right, moving on. The India Today's Conclave, the latest edition was held on Friday, 4th November and 5th November with guests like Ministers Nitin Gadkari ji and Kiran Rijiju ji. And also, I mean, it included several members from the Indian industry and the film fraternity and so on. In fact, our friend Harsh Madhusudan also was on a panel with Sri Pawan Verma. The guests covered a wide variety of topics, including Indian economy, climate change, politics, culture, movie, and so on. Uh, However, the most notable talk was given by the person we all least expected, perhaps. I mean, Australian sociologist Dr. Salvatore Babones, an associate professor at the University of Sydney. He stated that India was wrongly portrayed as a fascist state and that organizations and so called liberal intellectuals who built their opinions against the government were anti India. Abhishek, this was a firecracker of a session, right?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, there were a few interesting sessions, right? So just a quick shout out to the discussion between Harsh and Pawan Verma. I would request our viewers and listeners to check that one out as well, right? It was a very interesting discussion about Hinduism versus Hindutva and various things connected to that. So as usual, Harsh was wonderful to listen to. So yeah, do check that out. Coming to this one, right? We have the great Rajdeep Sardesai conducting, a controversial topic as usual, right? As to why India's
So,
democracy.
so I allow an intervention on that, right? I mean, it just so happens that irrespective of who the guests are, somehow I mean Rajdeep gets belted, right? I mean,
So yeah, I mean, in some ways, I mean, to be fair, he does make it interesting as well to listen to, right? I mean, you are rooting for the guest to actually, give it nicely to Rajdeep. So, but yeah, I think the broader context here was that uh, that across various global surveys, right, India's position has been going down when it comes to democracy, right? And there are various reasons and facets around that, right? So I think the big point that Professor Salvatore made here was that according to him, these surveys or these ranking institutions are not biased in themselves, right? Like they are doing a job in a particular manner that they see fit, right? And so he said that basically it's not correct to impute any sort of inherent bias within them. But what is happening is that their methodology basically is about speaking with a lot of intellectuals, academics, eminent citizens of any country, right? And right now, the intellectual climate in India is definitely pretty much anti the Narendra Modi government, right? And so basically, the responses that come out of India are definitely, um, if you group them, they are coming up with these conclusions that India is seeing a democratic backsliding, right? I mean, in one sentence during the conversation, he was quite blunt about it. He said that basically India's intellectuals are anti-India. Now, of course, you could argue, I mean, and as Rajdeep argued, no, they are doing a great service by calling out all the uh, deficiencies of the country and so on. But the point is that whether you call it anti-India or the anti-Indian government, depending on your point of view, that is a fact, right? Like the sample set that you have out of uh, India is going to be extremely left-leaning. It is going to be extremely anti-BJP and anti-Narendra Modi. And I think that sort of is basically a factor of the total institutional dominance that the left has, right, in academia and media, right? And that is something we all of us know that, right? And so as he was saying, right, who is answering these surveys, right? There's probably some academic out of elite US institutions, Indians based in elite institutions in the US, like from Harvard or whatever, or people from, let's say, JNU, right? Right. These are the places the people will go to collect their responses. And so you will get all the data points you need for, a particular narrative, right? And so, yeah, I mean, I would say that the let's say the right wing, or like the nationalist side of the discourse hasn't done enough yet to build institutions, right? Institutions of eminence and things like that, which will give a different narrative out to the world. Sure, social media is doing some of that, and maybe social media is able to help you out in electorally or in public perception within the country. But despite that, if you are looking for how the rest of the world perceives you, then you will definitely continue to get this kind of a skewed picture because of how the institutions of this country are currently, aligned.
Yeah, I mean, so more than a couple of things to add. One is the fact that, um, look, I mean, these reports and whatnot, right? I mean, I think the veneer has sort of started, fading in some sense, right? I mean, these are not. I mean, these is something that people used to consider seriously at some point, and the liberal establishment perhaps considers it sacrosanct, an indictment of how the India is and whatnot. But one of the things that you realize in Professor Babonus's very nice exposition on the conclave is that the methodology itself is so flawed, right? Um, I mean, it's like basic data checks. For instance, cherry picking when to start the decade, right? I mean, you start the decade from 2010 or 2011. I mean, how can you do that? I mean, you should have some kind of standardization, consistency, right? Or unless, I mean, you're admitting that, hey, I've already made a certain narrative and I'm trying to suit the data to suit the facts, right? The fact that, I mean, they rely on second-hand sources. Now, I understand when you're doing this across 150, 170 countries, I mean, it's perhaps difficult to do first-hand research yourself, right, and publish annually. But there should definitely be checks and balances in place, right? I mean, like, I was shocked that, the entire India ranking was done by an intern, right? And and in 1 year, I mean, we just slid dramatically, right? And it's very important to understand the antecedents of some of the folks who work on this stuff, right? It's extremely important to understand people's biases, like they say, lies, damned lies, and statistics. So so all of those kind of gaping holes, right, I mean, is was very apparent in what Professor Babonus said. And it's good that it's someone like him, right? I mean, he's based in Australia. He's from the US, I think,
Yeah.
right? And has absolutely no stake in the game here, right? No dog in the fight as such. Right, there's no point calling him a Bhakt or a Modi supporter or anything of that sort. The poor guy doesn't even vote here, right? I mean, he's kind of the perfect person to sort of show the mirror to us, right, in terms of what these rankings are all about. And I mean, you could impute some innocence to the folks and institutions who kind of bring out these rankings, but you can't say that it's not used adversely against us, right? It's just really, you can protest as much as you want about the government, but then, I mean, like he said, this kind of reflects in the international fraternity, right? If a journalist is kind of writing a piece and the first 10 results she sees when she Googles is, India is a fascist state, then guess what she will write about, right? Um, So yeah, I mean, it's a deeper question. I think it brings up a deeper question in terms of how we're going to dismantle this bias as such. Particularly, considering that whatever's happened in the US. I mean, you don't call the US a fascist state. I mean, for God's sake. I mean, like we at least accept our election results, right?
No, but the
There's
thing is, the left in the US very much wants to call US a fascist state if a Republican wins. So the entire midterms that is going to get voted next week, right? The Democrats are saying that if you don't vote for us, then democracy is dies in the United States, right?
no, but
So
how many articles will you
and,
find? How many
and
articles will you find in the New York Times or in the Washington Post calling US a fascist state?
no, they will call it if the Democrats lose. So, and here they have already lost, right? So here they are more comfortable to calling India a fascist state, right?
See, even
So
under, so let's look at it even under Trump, right? I mean, I think perhaps the most egregious example of all, right? I mean, people thought that the world had gone to hell. I don't remember seeing an article either in any of these, Washington Post and New York Times,
no, I mean you
etc.
will find plenty of opinion pieces, especially after the what is that the January 6th incident,
Yeah.
right? Where
Hmm.
in fact, so there is this scholar in Brookings, Shadi Hamid, right? So he has been having TV debates with Mehdi Hassan over the last 2 3 weeks, trying to argue that US is not a fascist state, right? So the anchor Mehdi Hassan is like, of course it's a fascist state, especially with the Republicans, or rather, it was not US being a fascist state. The debate was, are the Republicans fascist, right? And like it looks absurd to us from a distance, but like the left in the US has called the Republican Party basically fascist, right? And so let's assume or let's think of a scenario that Trump wins in 2024. I mean, the scenario in the US media will be pretty much the same as what the Modi government has been facing here, right? I don't think there is going to be any difference. And they are
There,
actually quite, I mean, I remember, so this thing is a little funny. So I remember in 2014, right, when Narendra Modi won, and again this whole controversy started, right? So I remember the CPM leaders. I think it was Prakash Karat who actually once then had to write an article saying why the BJP is not fascist. Like we agree that they are bad and so on, but he actually said that they are not fascist. So I mean, it was getting that absurd in the Indian media in early 20 or 2014 onwards, right? So now it's just that now this word has once again, become very popular and fashionable in the West, right? With Italy, you had Giorgia Meloni winning, and a bunch of articles calling her or her party a fascist party, and so on. So, I mean, right now it's all about, uh, you know, using maximalist words to make your point, not really worry about the consequences of what you're saying, but just, ensuring that you are able to demonize your opposition side as much as possible. So, yeah, I think broadly the trends are in the same direction. Yes, we may be in different points in the spectrum when it comes to, where which country is being perceived in which way. But I'm sure, for example, that when the next survey comes, some of these institutes will use the Roe versus Wade judgment, right, as one more indicator of why the US is sliding down, right? So, in fact, even the US is now called like a flawed democracy kind of thing, right? While we have totally gone into autocracy. So so we are on the same path, but maybe in different points in that sliding scale.
but I suppose, as the professor says, right, the US has more avenues to kind of make their case, right? And arguably, I mean, the world knows more about the US than, the world knows about any of the other countries, right? And India maybe now, right, gaining in prominence on the geopolitical stage, but how many of them will really do the
So
research in terms
yeah,
of finding out what
I
the reality
guess
is in India?
the way to look at it is that there are far fewer ways for India to tell its story, or India to give its own story in its own terms, right? So that is why, for example, every time uh, Foreign Minister Jaishankar speaks, right, it makes headlines sometimes, obviously, all the time in India, but few times in the West as well, because that is one of the few occasions where someone is actually giving a pro-India or a positive story about India that is being heard around the world, right? Otherwise, you will only have uh, most of the people outside India. And so, again, I would say that there is a population around the world who deals with Indians and India at a business level, right? And I think let's say through our tech companies or other businesses, right? And they have probably have a much more better or nuanced view about how Indians are, right? But for those parts of the population who only look at media as casual observers, right, through their mainstream media, if you are going to them, they would think that India is truly a hellhole right now, right? Because of the coverage that you see in New York Times, Washington Post, Guardian, Financial Times, Economist, and all these are prestigious media outlets, right? And they give a terrible picture about the country. Now, a question could be asked as to why India never developed its own world class, or let's call it perceived to be a sort of respectable media institution. If Qatar could, pull it off with Al Jazeera,
Yeah.
right, and Turkey has RT, right, uh, and so then why doesn't India have any of them, right? So yeah, I mean that's something for us to ponder over. But the picture is true that right now India's perception among, let's say, casual general populations is bound to be pretty poor given the coverage that it faces.
Yeah, but see, the thing also is, right? I mean, it's a bit of an oxymoron to call India an elected autocracy or call anyone an elected autocracy. Like, what does it mean, right? How can you, like, how does an autocrat get elected twice in a row,
Yeah.
right? And
No,
why
no.
does an autocrat require the mandate of an election in the first place, right? I mean, it's absurd actually. Well, more on this in a couple of episodes that we've covered with Ruchir Sharma and Vishal Ganeshan. We'll link to it in the description. Yeah, Nirav, you wanted to make a quick point?
No, no. So basically, what has happened is you got one set of the people who have the megaphones, and they cannot accept that the people that they support did not win. So I think the only alternative is like as Jai Shankar is speaking, as like Bharatvaarta has this kind of a podcast, is like try and have like a more balanced view, try and like show the wins. You uh, for example, like even we are not covering it on Bharatvaarta, didn't have big news didn't happen. Uh, we are having a third Taiwanese company assembling iPhones in India. So you had Foxconn, Winstron, and Pegatron, right? So this is like a positive news. If these
Yeah,
kind of
but
things get propagated more, and
Nirav,
see the business decisions which are changing, so they see that what all is happening, right? And if like average Indians kind of have like a via social media, etc., right? Come out there and express their opinion that how average Indian's life has actually improved over the last few decades. It's been an ongoing process, right? So it's not as if anybody's rights have been curtailed, etc., etc. And I liked the cherry picking of data, where they said that, oh, India has had like the highest journalist killings because India has a very large population. So second to China, the number is 4. So that's 4 too many, but it is 4 in a country of 1.4 billion. There are a lot of other countries with smaller population, and so India is probably one of the safest countries for journalists, right? So I think these are the kind of things where again, like as you had like Twitter kind of silencing one side of the stories and picking winners themselves. if these kind of things change and more people are just giving out their views, their own personal opinions and anecdotes, I think that's the way you change. Also, mainstream media, this is why it's losing out, right? Because they're sticking on to like one biased opinion, etc., and they have their own echo chamber. If it is more democratized and diversified, I think this kind of opinion will change, and it'll take time, but it will happen.
No, and look at how popular these clips are, right? I mean, whether you take YouTube or social platforms, etc. I mean, I would hazard a guess and say that, 3 out of 4 clips that actually go, viral in politics or policy or whatever is stuff that is positive, right? Stuff that is, against the beaten narrative that, everything is
Yeah,
shit in
but
India.
Carrie, we are talking about India's impression abroad, right? I mean,
Yeah.
within India, obviously, this narrative is not winning that
Yeah,
India
yeah,
is
yeah.
the fastest country. Now, couple of points, right? Like, uh, firstly, uh, you know, let's take the business thing that Nirav talked about, right? I think it's not that India's economic numbers are being used to, beat us up, right? I think what they are saying, for example, and it's very hard to refute. Like, I remember reading one of these surveys, I don't know which one it was, whether it was VDEM or whether it was the Freedom House one. So some of the parameters they said where India is worse off today than in the past is like election commission. So they are saying the election commission of India is less independent today than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and so on. Now, how do you measure that? You can't measure that. But what has happened is they have spoken to 20 people from JNU, let's say, and JNU people have told them, yeah, it is now doing the bidding of the BJP. So it is less like you cannot fight that narrative unless you have pro India, pro BJP people answering the survey, right? So the game is rigged at that level.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Then, for example, you had another of these metric was the Supreme Court is less independent today than in the past. The only basis for that was basically the Ram Mandir decision, right? And so now, if if you ask 100 supporters of the government, they will say that the Supreme Court is actually very biased against the government, or that's the perception government supporters would have. But these 20 people who have answered the surveys have told these institutes that India's Supreme Court is less independent today, right? And they have used the Ram Mandir judgment, for example, as their example for making that case. Now it's like so. As I was saying, the game is rigged at the level of these subjective answers, right? So you can't really combat it unless you come up with your own survey, right? To give a
Or at least have a
alternate
fact checking, have a fact checking, and like come out in media,
Yeah.
etc.,
even
talking
in
about how was
fact
this survey done.
even in fact checking, right? Who has captured the fact checking space? The people who are about to apparently get the Nobel Prize, right? They are like well known uh, opponents of the government, right? So even the fact checking industry out of India is giving the same narrative that these prestigious so-called prestigious democracy measuring institutes or surveys are giving. So yeah, I mean we are fairly behind the 8 ball when it comes to this field, right?
Yeah, plenty to talk about on this. Perhaps, I mean, we should do an episode of its own. I mean, we've invited Professor Balbonis, so hopefully, I mean, we'll have him on the podcast sometime and discuss more of this stuff. All right, moving on. Well, there have been a series of layoffs, in tech. Of course, I mean, for those watching on YouTube, you are looking at, engineers Rahul Ligma and Daniel Johnson. But in reality, there have been plenty of people laid off as well. About 15,700 plus employees have been laid off in 2022. This is following the startup funding winter. And primarily, these folks have been laid off across about 44 startups, including Byju's, ChargeBee, Cars24, Lead, Ola, Misho, MPL, Innovator, Unacademy, and others. expectedly, EdTech has seen the most layoffs, followed by consumer services and e-commerce. This was on expected lines, unfortunately, right? I mean, 2021 was a year of unbridled optimism. We had plenty of money come into the ecosystem, I think $40+ billion. And everyone really went for growth, right? I mean, so which meant even in tech, it means adding people, right? And there was plenty of hiring, and I would say, I mean, this is kind of a correction, or for what has happened over the last couple of years. Especially the hiring market was extremely bullish. I know people who have changed jobs like a couple of times in a year, at phenomenal increments as well, right? And so this was kind of unexpected lines, I should say. But um, yeah, I mean, it's sad nevertheless, right? I mean, these are times when you kind of think about sustainable growth and all of those things, the things that are not as fashionable to talk about in the good times. Yeah, Nirav, Abhishek, any comments?
Yeah. So one thing is, see, I think these are all like ebb and tide. These things are cyclical. This happens. I think a lot of the tech companies, they were like flush with too much cash, too much stimulus. Globally, everywhere interest rates were too low. So all the pension funds, etc., had to allocate to like very high growth to try and like meet their nominal return targets. Now, when interest rates are higher, they don't need to take that much risk and invest in like shooting for the moon growth type startups where you want, I can have 99 mistakes, but one unicorn returns me 1,000 times my money. That makes it 10x, right? You've seen that flow of money move out, as you mentioned, the funding winter. Similarly, like a lot of these tech companies had great valuations. You've seen like Facebook market cap go from 1.1 trillion peak to about 250 to 260 billion now, right? So losing about 75% of its market cap. Amazon, I think Apple is the lone one which has actually done well, but like Amazon or Microsoft, all these have seen. So what happens is in like bull markets or great cycles, you hire a lot of people. There's indiscriminate hiring, the shortage of workers. You just go and hire whoever you can, pay up, etc. So you're only focused about top line. Now you're like focusing on the bottom line. Maybe some of those crazy hiring decisions are reversed. It's a very sad time, to be fair, for an employee who gets made redundant. And these are very the decisions need not always be the perfect ones. When you have to eliminate 10, 20, 30% of the staff, those decisions have to be made quickly and rashly, right? So Elon Musk has said that he's probably firing 50% of Twitter staff, right? 3,700 people. So it is very tough on people. But what happens, you have to take the good with and the bad with it, right? It's in this industry is like that. You see like very big booms, and you also see like frequent busts in a cycle. It is, if the people are like smart, talented, this is a good time to network, reassess in which direction you want to take your career to. And everybody usually does land on their feet, right? So I think this is just a cyclical adjustment. We see more maybe natural valuation. You see more staffing coming to like normal levels, and then again the growth comes up slowly. So yeah, it's just a cycle.
Yeah. All right, to round things off with some sporting news, the T20 World Cup is ongoing and the semi-final qualifications are in process. New Zealand on Friday became the first team to seal their spot in the semi-finals of the T20 World Cup by beating Australia in a crucial game. For Team India, the plan is to win the Super 12 match on Sunday, today, and enter the semi-finals. Interestingly, India only needs to score a point in their final fixture against Zimbabwe to advance to the semi-finals. If Pakistan loses to Bangladesh and Netherlands defeats South Africa, Team India can still enter the semi-finals with a superior net run rate, despite losing the match against Zimbabwe. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. Pakistan needs to beat Bangladesh in their final fixture today and will require either Team India or South Africa to avoid winning their respective matches today if they are to qualify for the semi-finals. Guys, what do you think?
So South Africa already lost to Netherlands. So now it's simpler. India has qualified. It's just whether one or two.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, and Pakistan is already leading versus Bangladesh. Probably they win. So Pakistan might make it through. Bangladesh, if they like really pull it back from here, kudos to them. So basically, Pakistan, Bangladesh is an effective quarterfinal. Whoever wins, and then India, if Pakistan has superior net run rate, and if they win, they'll have a better net run rate than India. So now India has to beat Zimbabwe to be the top team. The winner of our group between India and say Pakistan. So say the top team will play England at Adelaide, and New Zealand will play the second team at Sydney. So it's interesting. T20 is like nice and unpredictable. I had mentioned in the T20 podcast as well, like even an IPL or like Bash, etc. Right? There is a 25% chance that the worst team can beat the top team on a given day, right? And I think semis onward, it's about 50-50. So let's see, fingers crossed. Hopefully India beats Zimbabwe, so we don't have to bother about net run rate and all those kind of things, and keep the momentum as we go into the semis. Abhishek, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think looks like Pakistan will comfortably win. So I think the expected semi-finals is India, England, and Pakistan, New Zealand, right? And I think Pakistan would probably be the favorites on the form, right? Since their losses to India and Zimbabwe, they have really turned it around. And firstly, beating South Africa was a really big thing, right? Which derailed the South African campaign totally. And yeah, I think uh, I don't know what the odds are, but maybe there is some good money to be made betting on Pakistan. As far as India is concerned, I mean, I don't know whether we have played well or not. We really were in a bad situation against Bangladesh, right? And the rain and one miraculous run out really helped us out that day. So yeah, I think I mean India will should be competitive. I don't expect any team to thrash us or anything, right? But it then comes down to margins and close calls, right? And how the key moments the team performs, right? So far, Virat Kohli has had a great World Cup, so hats off to him. He's turned around his form finally after a couple of poor years. So that has been a really good positive for India.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of cricket, I happened to see a wonderful thread by W.V. Raman. I'm not sure how many of you remember. He was an opening batsman, left-handed, I think.
Yeah.
Right. He put out this thread on Erapalli Prasanna and Bishan Bedi bowling in the nets in the 80s to Azhar and Shrikant and so on. And really, it's a masterful thread. I don't want to ruin it. But yeah, I mean, I think this is something that I miss in the modern game as such, right? I mean, every ball has to be a wicket ball. I mean, there is really no setup and climax and resolution as such. But yeah, I mean, wonderful thread. Do check it out. We'll link to it in the description. That's it from us on the Bharatvaarta Weekly. Thank you again for joining us. Again, rate and review us on all of your favorite platforms. It helps more people discover this content. We put out a couple of episodes or more every week on politics, policy, and culture. Do tell your friends about it, share the episodes and whatnot. Chalo, from Nirav, Abhishek, and myself, thank you again for joining us. Stay safe, take care, and Jai Hind.